time for year end list. Top 10 favourite reads of the year. Video, so you can forgive me for rustiness or otherwise. And one of the plans that I had in not making a video for a long time was that when I went to pull books from behind me, if anybody was watching any of my content, they wouldn't be able to remember which books are missing. Not really the reason at all, but thought we'll try and use my time away as having some meaning. But I'm going to do top 10 favourite books of the year, and this is obviously very difficult. Like, I had the best reading year of my life, like a lot of people, and I thought to myself, well, this will be easy, you know, pulling together 10 books to represent my year. And pulled together 10 books I did, and you know, it wasn't easy at all. Honourable mentions, I mean, I could talk about Trials of Ice Mountain with John Palladino. Excluded it mainly because I'm not long finished reading it, and kind of recency bias plays a large part in, I think, my ranking. But suffice to say, I think it was a great read, should have been read along. And other honourable mentions like Air Withams, Legend of Blackjack, you know, there are lots of them. I even could mention the fact that A Cold Days by Dresden so nearly made the list, but I only really loved the last 20% of that book, really, if I'm truthful. But the last 20% is amazing. So let's get into my top 10. We've got a mix of trad, we've got a mix of independent published here, and what I've found, actually, some of the things that I found when I made my list is actually have a thing for books that are continuations of books, first books in the series. And let's be honest, don't judge, right? There are books that I have near up the top here that I could have continued on and read, and I know it makes no sense that I haven't, but look, bear with me. These are the 10 favourite books that I had this year. My list, my rules. If you don't like it, you can stop watching at any time. You can skip video. I'll be able to see from the retention numbers, etc., whether this was effective at all. We'll start with number 10. And a book that I kind of thought that I shouldn't even include because of, well, its proximity to me. So number 10 is The Children of Gods and Fighting Men from Shauna Lawless. A book that I read, I posted a review to. I even went to the damn book launch, and I thought, God, that excused me from even putting this in the list. Because I went to the book launch and met Shauna. I've done streams with Shauna. Subsequently, I'm doing a subsequent thing in the future. And I keep coming back to the fact that I keep on doing those things and keep putting myself in those positions because I really like the damn book. And for that reason, I have to put it in my top 10 somewhere. It's the first book in a series here that is an Irish historical fantasy that tells the story mainly of two women from opposite ends of the magical spectrum, if you want, in terms of 10th century Ireland, and their kind of role in both manipulating and being part of a political turmoil within Irish history. It's great fun to read. The fabulously fleshed out and drawn characters here to go from. Characters that you can sometimes pull for and sometimes hate. Kind of that push and pull in there, and great fun. And I'm holding up this copy because it's gorgeous. This is the Broken Binding edition. You know, can't be bad. That beautiful, you know, painted edges and a lovely cover, and a really terrific read. Not just if you're from Ireland, but if you like, especially female characters and stories, and strong female characters and interesting female characters and multi-leveled characters in general. I think this was a great book and great to start off this list. Next up is a science fiction book. So I have a mix of genres. This is amazing. This one is a book that only when I was putting together the list at the end, I'm like, God, don't forget about that one. It's Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And Andy Weir's writing is one that I sort of have some problems with, insofar as that it's, I mean, he's obviously a science teacher writing a book, and it always sort of feels like he's a science teacher writing a book, because it's kind of like explaining the science, and kind of the plot comes from the science that he wants to tell. It's sort of like a book by numbers at some stage, but it's elevated in this case by some terrific writing, and specifically characters. I think this has the best character of any book this year. I'll not say too much about that character, other than to say that if you read it, you know who I'm talking about. The fact that character's brought to life in such a way, and it uses the amnesia trope quite well. I think some others people have said this. in something that, is convenient in some ways, but it's used here to backfill story and actually to obscure what the character already knows. That makes sense. I think it's great fun. It's like a good rip run ride. I'm not sure this is real movie material like The Martian is, because I think trying to visualize properly some of the things that happen in this book might be troublesome, and better lives in the memory and lives in the visualization in our heads. And for that reason, Project Hail Mary is my book number 9. Book number 8 is a book that I got actually off somebody else's list last year. It was actually Bookborn's list, and a book that I otherwise wouldn't have picked up and read. It's Ken Liu's short story collection, The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories. And this kind of started around Easter time. I was reading one of these stories in the morning before I went out and work. I was kind of set your alarm early, read one of the stories. Some of them are short enough, some of them are a bit longer, but they tell kind of these little tales that, like a lot of short stories, poke and prod at singular kind of themes and ideas. Whether that's the use of technology, the use of culture, the prevalence and importance of culture in our lives. There are lots of different themes in here, and going in and starting your day reading one of these stories was such a joy and such a very fond part of my reading year. When I think back to it, that it felt wrong to exclude something in this. Obviously, the paper Menagerie story itself is the one that's famed. It's the one that's won the awards, and for a couple of pages story is all it is deeply effective. But there are many other ones that are in here. The kind of murder mystery one that uses cybernetics as the thing. The one at the very end, which tells a bit about the history of World War II, or certainly a part of World War II that I wasn't aware of, that made me go and explore the stories, etc., that were in that world or within that story a bit more, and kind of go, oh my god, this wasn't just fictionalized, this really happened. I think it's a wonderful collection of stories, and I urge you, if you've in a bit of a reading slump, or you want something to mix up, but you don't kind of want to balance multiple books, pick up a short story collection like Paper Menagerie and start your day off with a really great, thought-provoking piece of writing. 7 now, and again, one of those books that I kind of think, we should have left this off, because I've conversed with this person quite a lot over the year, but have been enriched very much by doing so. It all started with reading their book. It is The Seventh Kittens by Jim Milbourne. If anybody's been on the channel or seen the channel, will know I've done a lengthy conversation with Jim about this book pretty much, and I think when you watch that conversation you can see how much I really enjoy that book, how I really love the framing of it, how I really love the storytelling of it, and actually for all the wonderful and weird and wonderful types of story that get told and I've read, and I've kind of expanded my horizons this year, it's the familiarity of the Seventh Kittens as classic fantasy that I really love. Familiarity in its sort of scope, and then its character work that come through. Again, one of my favourite characters, from male characters especially, is in this book this year. Gabriel. I look at the list of people here, or the other characters that I have in here. It's one of the very favourites that I have this year. And it's not just to say it's a one-trick pony, but I think that's the one that I really gravitated towards, and I think Jim Milbourne's Seventh Kittens is a terrific book, and one, while it appears quite chunky, and I suppose it is quite chunky, of 607 pages, 700 pages, something like that, is one that I raced through, and I very much am looking forward to getting back to this world whenever Jim can find the time to furnish us with another book. I have that short story one still to read. I might even have read that by the time this video comes out. That's my number 7. Number 6 is a book that I don't actually have the physical copy of, although it's on the way. It's a series of books that I read back to back. It's book 2 in a series that I read towards the end of the year, and again had the pleasure to discuss and dive deeper into this series. It is book 2 of the Hellborn King saga by Christopher G. Brennan, which is the Rathbringer. Now, I read book 1 and thought book 1 was very good. I think the Hellborn King is very good. And what I learned from this experience is a lot of the annoyances and things that kind of went, God, I didn't really like that about that book, or I would have liked more of that in that book 1, were answered in the Rathbringer, and answered in spades as the world developed and we get more into the characters. And the characters that I disliked in book 1 are characters that I really looked forward to reading in book 2, while still not really embracing them as people. I found their stories fascinating, and I think the Rathbringer is just a reminder to me to trust the authorial process. The stories, or book ones of stories and book twos of stories, are only part of the journey. And actually, the things that I really love about the series now are things that I never even imagined were possible after the book one, as the author expanded the horizons of things that were even more joyful or even more interesting to read. So the Rathbringer, definitely a wonderful read for me. Really, as I say, one of my favourites of the year. In fact, I've put it at number 6 on my list of books for this year. And a series that I'm very much looking forward to continuing reading again whenever Christopher can find the time to furnish us with another book. Number 5 is a traditionally published book, and again a series that was one of the ones most responsible for real kickstarting my year in terms of really engaging with reading as a serious activity and hobby again. And I could have picked either of the books that I've read this, but this is book 2, Well of Ascension, from the Mistborn era one by Brandon Sanderson. These books look chunky. I think these may be the quickest read books that I've read all year. Book 2 continues on the story of Vin and her exploration of her relationships with people at the time, and also about the political machinations that go along the world as they take a world that's in turmoil and try and provide some stability. And I think one of the things that really comes to light about my reading journey this year and how much it's informed, the types of things that I like, one of the things that really comes to the fore is the fact that I, rather than characters being the reason to like books, and I've talked about those some previously, I like relationships. And not necessarily romantic relationships, because I actually think the romantic relationship sort of, well, it's okay. But the relationships between Vin and some of the other characters that are in here, the crew that's together there, are really where the joy in this book comes from. That kind of like merry gang of Robin Hood and his merry men, kind of very akin or similar to that, is where the real joy of this comes from. Sprinkling the magical kind of mystery that goes over the top, and you've got something that's really special and compelling. And let's be honest, he does a twist quite well, this Mr. Sanderson, and for that to be celebrated. But I would have been remiss if I didn't put either this book or The Final Empire in the list, because they were very much responsible for me driving and really eating up some books this year. Down to number 4, and this book kind of tells the story of where my year went wrong in some ways, because I read a couple of books by this person and kind of thought I'll read one of his books a month because I just think he's utterly incredible, and then get distracted by read-alongs and that kind of stuff. Look, let's just talk about it. It's McKee by Stephen King. McKee is a book that has sat on my shelf for 15-20 years maybe, and being unread. You can see kind of from the tattered nature of some of the spines, and many times, many house moves this has been through, etc. And McKee tells the story of a man who tries to rebuild his life after a serious accident in the Keys in Florida. And the place that he goes to isn't, in typical Stephen King style, all that it appears to be. There are people and characters, and again, a relationship between our central character, who becomes his best friend, the guy called Wireman, who I call Wirman, and the person that he looks after. And this kind of three-handed story, although there are a couple of other people that go around that, is just wonderful to explore. I think the world that is built, given that it's just supposed to be Florida, but you get really a good sense of place. You get a sense of actually the harmonious nature between the characters and the people and their activities and their day-to-day roles that they go about and do. I think McKee is one of Stephen King's very best novels. Of a full review, really are interested in exploring a non-spoiler review, but one that suffice to say, I even think it sticks the landing. Not something I say for every Stephen King book, but I think McKee is spectacularly. We're in our top 3 now, and where do you go from there? Well, I'll go to a series that we're really talking about, books that blew my socks off, books that really kind of went somewhere and did something. And this is a book 2 in a series. This is Howling Dark from Sonator, book 2. Now, as much as I love this book, I know it makes no sense that I haven't read any further on it, but these books should be savoured. There isn't that many of them, and there's things that happen in this book that are astounding. There are things and events and writing in this book that it was like lying in a bath and smothering yourself in suds sometimes. It was so delicious to read. It was one of those books that was very hard to put down. God, work Work. I've got to go to work instead of reading this book. These are the kind of real joys of reading and of storytelling that you kind of think, I want more of this. It took a world that was sort of fantasy, science fiction, kind of somewhere in the middle. It played in both sets of genres and made it very sci-fi. We've got cybernetics, we have the AI, we have lots of very kind of big technologies. I don't want to say them, but you know, those are only spoilers for the story that's in here. The story and the journey. And I think of all the books on my list, this is the one that feels most epic in nature. The kind of things that might be great in a movie, but actually live better in a book. Because the imagination has no budget, as they often say. And Howling Dark is just terrific. I can't wait to continue. A lot of people say Demon and White is their favourite book in the series. If that's so, I mean, bring it on. 2023 is going to be another couple of... bring another couple of great books into my life. And so that's my number 3 book. Top 2. And for all I've said about book 2s and starting and beginning in the middle of the series being a favourite, I'm left with 2 books that are 2 book 1s. And which order to go in was always the struggle. And book that's second in my list is Jaguar of Dallas, Touch of Light. Now, I can't even tell you exactly why this is number 2 on my list. I mean, obviously, it's a book that I really enjoyed reading. Obviously, it's a book that I think is incredibly well written with great prose. Obviously, it's something that I connect with on an emotional level. But there is a special sauce in this book. I'm still struggling to come to grips with what it is about this book that I really like. And I think some of it comes from the stuff that I think an awful lot of others would try to fix. There is a sense of purpose and a sense of writing that keeps a bit of mystery back. I think Chago's talked about it himself insofar as he's been talked that he ground his chapters. You know, you don't always have a sense of where you are and exactly what's happening at the start of every chapter. And I think that might be one of my favourite bits of it, because the world is changing, the world's in turmoil, and you as the reader are just like the characters insofar as you don't know where you are sitting or stable, or you don't exactly know what's happening. Anything could happen at the time. And while the story kind of evolves around you, around 3 characters, main characters, or 3 points of view that are trying to find their way and their destiny within a world, what you've got is something where you're never really sure where they're going. They're not always pointing the same direction, or while they might be pointing there, actually something might be happening over here, which is actually what they're being drawn to. And that feeling of being pushed and pulled, and the fact that really the writer doesn't even feel in control of where he's leading you narratively, I think that might be the thing. But hey, there's a special sauce about this book. I just remember putting it down, going, that's a really good read, really enjoyed it, and then it's spinning over in my head for days and days and days, weeks and months upon end, to the point that I still think today, the themes of this book and the things that Chago does when he's writing kind of transcend some of these other things in books. And whether it's totally by design or otherwise, there's definitely something that I really look forward to reading, Shades of Madness, etc., coming out in January. And I'm waiting and eating that up at that time and getting this nice introduction of the book, etc., as there is. Jaguar of Dallas, Touch of Light is number 2 book of the year. And my number 1 book of the year is, well, the book that absolutely blew my mind. And in fact, as I've seen some early top 10 lists that have come out this year, I kind of seen it appear a lot. But I also think it's a Marmite book. It's a book that a lot of people seem to bounce off, for as many people as utterly adore it. And in fact, a lot of people say while they adore this book, the writing in the series only gets better and better as you go forward. The book that's my number 1 and favourite read of the year is without doubt Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hall. And I know it makes no sense that I haven't continued the series, but it scared me how much I enjoyed this book. I had a friend, Dali, who's been on the channel did the Reacher episode with me and said he tried to read it and bounced off it, and I completely understand, because within about 2 or 3 pages I was completely hooked on the writing style of this book, the characters, the simplicity of this world, and one that I couldn't wait to see evolve, because the magic isn't fantastical to a level that I couldn't understand. It was subtle. It's a book about, I said this before, relationships. Relationships between a boy who doesn't really have relationships, and the positive and negative and sort of nurturing aspects of relationships on his life, as we can see him being moulded, as events mould him, as people mould him, and how his opinion actually of people and those relationships can sometimes be wrong and misjudged. Fascinating, and it's all so beautifully written. And for a book that looks like nothing, it felt like a book that you swam in. Like you were reading, but you were actually just swirling around in the words, as the prose being delicious. You know, some people might not like the flowery nature of it. I absolutely, and I can't wait to continue my Realm of the Elderlings walkthrough over the course of the year. Any other book being number 1 would have been disingenuous, I think, because this is the book that I cooed, cried, felt the whole way through. Those are my top 10 books of the year. Apologies to anybody that didn't make the list, but a kind of testament to the amount of books that I did read this year. A testament to the great recommendations and the great support of everybody within the community this year, both in terms of on Twitter and also in the YouTube and BookTube community itself, whether that be around the PageTune area that I've seemed to have spent an awful lot of time and effort and enjoyed so much of people's company this year, to the wider community in general. It's been a great first year in BookTube for me, one that I'll probably do a video about when I come around the 1-year anniversary of making that first proper video around February, to kind of talk about that experience as someone who had made other YouTube content and been in other communities before. If you've made it this far, thank you much for watching. I hope you had a great year of reading, as great as I have, and I hope to see you again soon. And it mightn't be quite as long until I put up another video. Take care, and I'll speak to you again soon. Happy New Year.